Way fell.
Now you ought to see about 1 million buttons right now.
I see a million buttons right now.
Yeah, this is a new website, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But basically, it's a way to access all of these where do we locate games, because in third grade, the kids are trying to figure out where to put an indigenous village. And in fourth grade, where they're going to put a French fur trading port. In fifth grade, they're looking about where they're locating an initial colony. Sixth grade are looking at a homeland area in China because it's a world geography. Seventh and so on. And in eighth grade, we're building a defensive fort. What these are a very carefully graded set of simulation activities. The maps as you go up here get more and more complex because the point of the activity isn't really to teach how to read maps. It isn't to teach anything particularly about fort location. The point of the activity is for you to have a discussion with your students, a discussion that makes social studies seem like fun because they're busy trying to see how they're going to protect themselves against some bad guys here. And it gives you a chance to diagnose their prior knowledge about geography in general, about history in general, about how you reason about past events, and to diagnose a little bit about their map skills. And so we're using grade appropriate map skills. Now, Derek mentioned that he's teaching through a whole handful of grades. I have to admit that my background is the reason that this page looks like it does. My father was the principal of a Lutheran school teacher and taught 7th and 8th grade at the same time. And I started my teaching career by teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in a 3-room school. Where there was one other teacher doing K-3 and one was doing 4 and 5, the lucky one. And so I keep thinking one of the things that we have lost over time as our schools have gotten bigger and more carefully organized and so on is this linkage between the grades. So you might actually want to wander out this website sometime and see what the activities are at earlier grades, especially if or if not your earlier grade teachers are using giants. And you might want to borrow some ideas from them. I mean, go all the way back to the summer village in 3rd grade to see what they're learning about Michigan when they do that. Because these activities are all set in a real place. Like I say, they do have some content knowledge, but the point is not to do the content knowledge. And with that, I'm going to just turn one of these on. I would ask for a second that if you are sitting in front of your computer and you've got your camera, that you turn it on, because I might want to ask you to vote with your fingers sometime along here. Like I say, if you're not, that's no big deal. But if you are, so thank you very much, Laurie, that I at least get one person's eyes looking back at me somewhere in here. What this is a simulation about how you consider geographic conditions and connections when you do something in history. And it is about, therefore, the difference between a geographic and a historic perspective. So this is a real place. For about 10 years, I worked in New York City, and a lot of New Yorkers would know this instantaneously exactly where it is. We're keeping its identity secret for now. You're allowed to think about it for a little while, but your point is to focus on a more important question. How do people think about where they're going to locate something? And that could be anything from a fort in history to the people in Marshall arguing about where to locate a factory that's going to make electric batteries for electric cars, you know. It's a question, it's a citizenship question. You can tie it directly to civics blitz because, in fact, this is modeling a civics process of making a decision. And that means it's going to tie into the decision about how to write a constitution a little bit later on. That's the kind of thing you ought to have in the back of your mind as you're thinking about how you're making a decision, not just what decision you're making. So with that, here is a map, and the resources that you've got in Giants will give you several versions of this map that you can print up and give to the kids if you want. And you're going to build a fortified city on this map here. You don't have a cell phone. This is back in Columbus's time. In fact, you could actually stop here and ask the students, what else don't you have that might play into this decision? Here's the map of the area that's around your homeland. It's about half the size of Great Britain, which means it's just about the size of Michigan. And the map maker followed a usual rule. Now I'm going to stop on this frame for just a second, because you might not think that 8th graders need to see this frame. And it's a good example for me to tell you something about our PowerPoints. They are all too big. And I'll repeat that. Every one of our PowerPoints is too big for a very simple reason. I looked at your computer keyboard and I noticed that it has a delete key on it, but it does not have a create key on it. We've run this activity with literally hundreds of teachers. If a teacher suggested something like a frame like this that talks about the colors on the map, we went ahead and put it in on the theory that if you don't want to use it, you can quickly delete it out of your presentation. But if you did want to use it, you don't want to make it from scratch. So PowerPoints tend to be a little bit too long because you're encouraged to edit them. That being said, your scouts have suggested 5 locations for your fort. Which one would you vote for? So take a look at the map and hold up, it's 5 for a reason, so that you can hold up the right number of fingers. Where are you going to build your fort? I've got a 1 and a 2 and a 4. And that's great. This is very typical in a class to have some subdivision. You can make an ELA click out of this right now and have them write a paragraph explaining why they want to do it. In fact, you could stop this presentation right now, have them write a paragraph at home defending their reason, and come back tomorrow and start over again. In other words, there's a whole lot of flexibility in using this game. But asking you to vote after looking at a really simple map exposes a real basic dilemma. That the only advantage of a democracy is that people can't blame anybody else when they get what they vote for. But it takes a lot of time and effort in order to get the knowledge that you need to make an informed vote. So what else would you like to know? And again, this is a good stopping point. You can have the students actually write up why they wouldn't have, what kind of information they'd like to have. The PowerPoint then goes on into a long, medium section about how do we define a location, because in your brain, and therefore on a map, the idea of location actually has 2 parts. One part is, what do we have right there? The physical and human characteristics of that place. And there's actually a Glick in 8th grade that says exactly that. Is it cold? Does it have trees? Rainy, hilly? And then it says, can you name one that does not flash on the screen? This is where you begin to see whether they understand the concept of conditions. Then it repeats that for the other network, which is in a very different place in your brain. And that's how a place is connected with other places. Is it, is it got a road? Is it upstream from something? Is it close to something or far away from something? And again, it asks for examples, but you may not want to ask for the examples. You might just want to run a quiz like this. Is fertile soil a condition or a connection? Point left or right. Bingo. How about the upstream from the swamp? So now here again, if you don't think that this quiz is needed in your grade level, by all means, delete all these frames out of here and get on to the point. So I'm going to just go ahead and race along. Is it easier to see conditions or connections from a simple map like this? So now I'm going to add a couple conditions. Here's a river. And you've already built the town next to that river there. Would you still vote for the same place? Build your fort now that you know that you already have a town. What place, where will you build your fort now? Hold up your hand. Now we got two people voting for a fort on the same river, I gather, right? Okay, I've added some information about cropland. Does that change your mind? And then I can add some information. E stands for some enemies, and they happen to be located in the middle of the best piece of cropland around here. And they have threatened to attack you. Now where do you want to build your fort? I've got 2 5s and a 3 now. And you can actually say, we're going to have a debate right now. We're going to put this in, as a vote in our Congress here. They don't have a Navy. Does that affect what's going on? Now I've added some information about where the mountains are. And you can see how we're doing this like this. Now there's a clickable map that you could do these in a different order if you wanted to. We'll talk about that later on in the second part of this thing. I've now added a few more rivers to the map. What location would you choose now? And now a really big complication. A very strong enemy has just come and built another fort at this location. Now where do you want to build your fort? So now we've got people at 4 and 5. Do you know where this is, by the way? I mean, I told you this is a real place. Well, again, a chance for you to continue a review with your students if you think they need it. Then have them compare the conditions at places 3 and 2, and then have them compare the connections at place 1 and 5. And you can diagnose whether they really got those ideas there. And then it goes on to talk about the real place. You get an idea where it is now? Bingo. And where were you choosing for a fort? At the end, you've got, well, it goes on and explains it, that this is New Amsterdam, the Haudenosaunee people that were the enemies were living up in that area. Buffalo got built over there. And place 4 wound up being Fort Stanwix, which was a key place in the French and Indian War and again in the Revolutionary War. And then something that the French built called Fort Carillon, and then that later on became Fort Ticonderoga. And that is, in fact, the place that we can visit pictorially if we want to. Now, this is an extremely well-designed star fort, surrounded on all sides by a swamp that made it very hard to attack, located at the end of a long lake where the cannons that were there would control whether any ship could arrive by that lake. The problem is, cannon technology had evolved a little bit between 1750 and 1775. And one of the effects of that was that the British were able to put a cannon up on the top of that hill and reach Fort Ticonderoga, and the fort essentially failed because it could no longer defend itself against the new military technology. And that led us into the Battle of Saratoga. And it's a way that you can use a game like this to help review some of the things that they should have learned about in 5th grade, but you're not sure that they remember over here. But it also points to the very strategic importance of places like Stanwix, Buffalo, Albany, Fort Ticonderoga, and so on. The point being that if students are trained to look at history as a result of the decisions that people made within the context of what they knew at the time, it engages a whole lot more of their brain power, and they can remember things a lot better. And with that, I'm going to say, do y'all have any questions about how to run the game? Because I think I've got about 30 seconds left.
Not a question, Phil, but I wanted to point out for Rachel and Derek's sake in particular that we have this same game in 7th grade. We've got the same grade in 5th grade. So the whole thing, what you just went through, it's set up exactly the same way. You ask the same questions, you stop at the same places, but all of them are different places. So even if kids have done them in previous grades, it's always a different place. So
and with a more complicated map and a more complicated geographic or historic relationship between what was going on at the time. And then Dave has turned some of these into an online game. And I don't know if you want to talk about that now or just make that part of the discussion later on if people want to stay around after 6:30. It's up to you.
it's actually part of where I'm going next. So I will.
In which case, I should stop here.
Yeah. And I am just making sure I'm sharing the right screen here because again, I'm landing planes with the monitors in my office here. But yep, so this is the same thing Phil was just showing, but in this particular case, the 8th grade online game is the same thing that you just went through, but it is a student interactive version. We do not recommend having kids just do this without you. The fun is in the discussions. The power of the activity is in the conversations. But if you have them follow along with you throughout this, what's nice is we built it from the student mind. And this can also be used after you've done it as a review. So if you wanted them to review it again later, they can go through this. And so you just keep clicking and going, and you can see all of it is here, and here's your place, and out of a cell phone, and yada, yada, yada. So it goes through. And what's really cool is it allows the students to vote. So like I picked 3 throughout a lot of this because I completely forgot that it was in that was in the middle of the mountains. So now you can see the advantages, see the disadvantages. So this can be a review game. What are those advantages? What are those disadvantages? Moving forward, what else would you like to know? So it mirrors what you're doing as the teacher, but it's done from the student perspective. So like the conditions, instead of flashing across the screen, the conditions you bring up with the hovering over the question mark. Same deal with connections. And then every time you get back to one of those choices, oh, we've got the quiz here as an actual drag and drop quiz. And then when you're done, they can check their answer. They can either go back to the quiz or they can move forward to the next slide. But every time the students make a choice, it saves their answer. And so the next time it comes up, it says, would you still vote for site 3? You know, because that's what I chose last time. The big caveat here is if you do this over multiple days, it doesn't save. Every time they refresh their browser window, it's a new thing. So if you're doing it over a couple of days, you know, have them leave that tab open on their Chromebook or their iPad and go back to it, and it'll still be saved. But if they refresh or if they go out, it doesn't save. That's beyond my programming skills right now. But the joke I told last night was I have 9 more bloodborne pathogen videos before I'm eligible to retire. And at that point, you know, I might have time to learn some harder core coding. Phil's second career after retirement became developing educational resources, and I would love to follow in his footsteps and keep building off of his work when I retire, when I have more time to learn some of the parts that I don't have time to learn at this point in time. So just know that these online games are here. They're all in one place. I'm actually going to put the link to this in the chat right now to where you can get all of them in one place, just in case you want it. But it's also all linked in the unit. So if I go to this, if I go to Unit 0, Lesson 1, you can see there's the presentation that Phil just did. Here's the map that students can fill out as they go. And then here's the specific interactive version that goes along with it. And then here's also the link to that landing page that has all of them if you wanted to share them with colleagues at other grade levels. So